Well, hello there to the people of the Riverina. Dale Gray from Bendigo Agriculture Victoria here with an outlook for spring and summer. Here we have our sea surface temperature anomaly chart and our El Nino sitting out here. Very warm in on the South American coast and somewhat warm, 1.37 degrees. A threshold of El Nino is 0.8, so it's really just a weak El Nino in there at the moment. What is not weak is in the Indian Ocean, where we have the most classic pattern of a positive Indian Ocean dipole that you could see. Warm water off Africa, cold water off Sumatra, and really propagating further than I have seen outside that box before. What is not typical from an El Nino perspective is that the water up here to our northeast off the Solomons and Papua New Guinea is completely normal. And by now, we would normally expect that would have been much cooler than normal up there and evolving a lot less moisture into the atmosphere, but that is yet to happen. The trade winds have been where it's all been expected to happen this year, and in the case of the Pacific Ocean, it hasn't happened. Normally, with an El Nino, we'd expect much stronger than normal trade winds to be blowing in a reversed fashion from the west to the east towards the Central Pacific. And we just haven't had that this year. But in the last 10 days, we've seen finally a burst of reverse trade winds in this area, which has just been picked up in this sort of one here. This is a 1 month summary. But it does look like the trade winds are finally picking up, which might mean that the water in this area here will progressively cool in the coming month or two. When we look over in the Indian Ocean, well, we see absolute classic positive IOD pattern here, much stronger than normal easterly trade winds pushing towards Africa, making the colder water up well off the coast of Sumatra. In fact, that is some really strong easterly winds there, which is what's really progressing that cooler water outside the box. The cloud pattern is where it's really at, and if we look at the Indian Ocean first, because that's the most striking, the brown colours, lack of colour, the blues and pinks in abundance, there's just a complete lack of cloud coming off that Indian Ocean dipole from Sumatra, 2/3 of the way over the Indian Ocean. That is the most massive eye of lack of cloud I've ever seen from a positive IOD. We have some extra cloud coming in over here off the coast, which we would expect in the case of a positive IOD. So that's absolutely cranking out there at the moment. We have a slight abundance of cloud at the dateline junction with the equator, which is in keeping with El Nino. But we've still got an abundance of cloud out here off Papua New Guinea, and that really should be retracted to east of the Solomon Islands. So this is still not really in keeping with an El Nino, and is probably where a fair bit of the moisture for that rain last week came from up here out of the Coral Sea, which is behaving itself fine and dandy. Pressure patterns, we have a large high pressure that's been on average has been spending large amounts of time over the southeastern corner of Australia. It's further north than we would expect for spring, where the centre of a high pressure should be over Adelaide. So being further north, that in theory allows fronts through, but it's not allowing the tropics to come down like we'd normally get in spring. Now, there obviously was a hiccup in this last week with the rain, but this prevailing pattern has been going on for a number of months now, and it's been pushing many of the frontal systems further south. And I suspect we'll see more of the same of that in the coming weeks and months. We've had a large increase in the size of the pressure that's been over. This means those pressure patterns are moving slower. High pressure over the whole of Australia, that's pretty normal for El Nino. Lower pressure out here at Tahiti, so the SOI is negative 13.1. Higher pressure in the tropics, harder to get moisture down. But just the higher pressure over southern Australia means that generally the triggers to rainfall are being hunted away. So just in summary there in terms of the ocean, the El Nino has been mucking around all year, and its surface and the ocean to depth and the pressure patterns are all absolutely of El Nino, but the wind pressure patterns and the cloud patterns are still sort of mucking around a little bit, but perhaps in the last week or two, it's finally starting to hook in. And the Indian Ocean, well, you couldn't wish for a more positive Indian Ocean dipole in terms of the way that that is behaving and set up. The other climate drive we have is around the Antarctica, around the southern annular mode. Spends its time in negativity and positivity. Once we get into spring, a positive southern annular mode often leads to more rainfall in the southeast quarter of New South Wales, and if it was over summer, that would poke into the Riverina. We had this really strong spike of positivity, which lined up with that rainfall event, and it probably had something to help and do with that. Means there's more easterly flow coming into southeastern New South Wales as a result of that. But both the Bureau and the NOAA model predict that this is going to return to normality over coming weeks. Now, generally when we have an El Nino, particularly over summer, we would expect a negative southern annular mode, which tends to dry off the southeastern quarter, or even sort of southeastern Australia there, eastern Victoria, southeastern New South Wales. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that actually manages to hook in, or whether the prevailing pattern over the coming last couple of years, and particularly last year with the Tongan volcano forcing a positive southern annular mode over summer, it's going to be interesting to see which of those climate influences actually wins in terms of spinning the SAM either positive, negative, or just behaving itself. So I've just updated the climate predictions here with a few models, 5 of them that have clocked over for October. The rest are still sitting on their September runs. These are predictions for southern New South Wales. The El Nino is predicted to go for the next 3 months into January. The positive IOD is expected to go on as well, although when you look at most of those models, they do start to break that down in November, which is what we would expect if all things behave themselves. As soon as the northern wet season clicks in, that positive IOD should go. But we still have plenty of drier signals for the next 3 months there, the vast majority of models sitting on the fence. Although I do note a few of them, including the Bureau's, has just gone more neutral for the next 3 months, suggesting that the October-November dry signal is stronger, but the December-January is less so, and we'll talk about that a little bit soon. But we also have very much likelier chances of it being much warmer over the next 3 months, which both those two climate drivers historically would do. The real crystal ball gazing out into early summer and even ducking a little bit into autumn next year, all the models keep that El Nino going, and all of them bar one knock the positive IOD off and warm up the ocean up there in the Timor Sea, and that would normally cease to not be a climate driver in terms of the IOD anyway over summer. And now we come back to the ballpark here with much more neutral forecasts. Still a few models going drier over that sort of late summer period, but a lot of them just sitting on the fence, which is pretty normal for this time of the year, particularly with El Ninos. They don't necessarily and have historically had really variable effects over summer. But that warm signal still hanging in there quite strong, with just generally large amounts of warm ocean around the world preheating the air mass as it comes over Australia. Now, just looking here at some historical effects of both El Nino and the positive IOD deniliquint, and more broadly over southeastern Australia, and just really showing that the chances of low, average and high rainfall are really almost all over the shop, both historically, once we get to November and December. So historically, anything has kind of happened with these two climate drivers, particularly once you get out of the influence of October. Another way of looking things is looking at El Niños over the summer period, and in fact when the Southern Oscillation Index has been strongly negative. This is just for Victoria, but I know it continues on into New South Wales as well. Is just an absolute hodgepodge of rainfall that's been above and or below the median for summer and in real close proximity to each other. So it really indicates to me quite stormy conditions here historically, and that anything has historically happened over summer. So there in a nutshell, that El Niño's finally getting its act together, which has taken a long time, really only the last 2 to 3 weeks where that's really linked in more properly. The positive IOD, well, that's been predicted for a long time as well, but it's really only just came about in the last month. And is the real deal, absolutely. The rest of spring is likely to be drier and warmer, as we'd expect from those two climate drivers. Summer is definitely likely to be warmer and possibly drier, but there's no guarantee of a necessarily drier summer as a result of the El Niño. Much more of that influence historically goes up into northern Queensland with El Niños over summer. Well, that's it from me. I hope you're having a good day there up there in the southern Riverina, and sincerely I hope harvest goes well, the crops are great, and the summer season's good too. All the best. Catch you later.